Well, we woke up curious to see our surroundings in the daylight, see where we had spent the night. Turned out we had done all right. We had managed to find a place where we were relatively safe from the desert winds, and thankfully, there wasn't much around.
So yesterday we went to the Toyota dealer in, what is that town? Ica. And they didn't have pads for an 80 series, but just by sort of pulling ours out, showing it to him, he was able to find these, which are GX470, Lexus GX470 rear pads. And those work, so yeah, take note of that if you have an 80 series. They don't carry parts for old trucks, except in the countries where they're used a whole lot. So I know in Bolivia, these are tour trucks. In Colombia, we saw a ton of them, so I'm sure they have pads. But here in Peru, you don't really see any 80 series, so super stoked that they found a match.
And I got a lot of organizing done this morning, which was good. So it looks slightly more organized. We still have boxes/bags of water in there, which is taking up a lot of space. But we're getting there. Slowly, we're moving back into the truck. Today we had decided to check out a nearby oasis, similar to the tiny laguna we had visited the day before, except this one had a little, very touristy town around it. We had seen some pictures on Instagram which made it look cool, but as we have learned, reality is rarely as good as Instagram. So I can't say we had high hopes, but the idea of maybe eating at a restaurant was just tempting enough, so we headed back on the road we had driven the night before in the dark, and made our way to a little town called Huacachina.
We're in Huacachina. It's the most picturesque desert oasis. If you haven't seen it, I mean, we'll show you some photos here, what we can, but it's amazing looking on Instagram. It's a giant tourist trap. You can't drive or walk anywhere without somebody wanting you to rent a dune buggy or whatever. You're not allowed to take your own truck into the dunes anymore, at least that's what they're saying today, and a few people said on iOverland or so. But then 6 months ago, people were going in the dunes on their own. We're not worried about that, only because if you take the road just north of here out to the dunes, that's where we camped last night and the night before, and there's massive dunes that were used in Dakar Rally, and it's all just open dunes, raw land, free, go wherever you want. So we're not going to pay to go here, but it's kind of a bummer. This is one of those ones that early, before we left on the trip, you see a photo and it's like this oasis in the middle of just white sand dunes. It's sort of like the pyramids in Egypt. If you take the photo from the right angle, yes, it's in the middle of the sand dunes and it's this oasis. Really, it's surrounded on three sides by some pretty sad poverty and rough looking areas and trash everywhere. And then sure enough, you do get into Huacachina and it's pretty clean. I mean, it's not like super clean, but it's pretty clean. Tons of gringos, tourists, backpackers, they're all here. Fancy restaurants, you can get micro brews, the whole deal, but it just doesn't feel authentic. It's all made for us, right? It's made for travelers to see here and go, oh, it's a beautiful place in Peru, but this isn't really Peru. It's kind of a bummer, but that's kind of the constant theme of this trip, is we're constantly finding gems in the middle of nowhere when we least expect it, and we're constantly having pretty much anything that we wanted to see before leaving on the trip be a bit of a letdown, just because of course Instagram and YouTube and just websites in general, blogs, make things look and sound better than they are. But that's all right. We're gonna consider getting some food here. We haven't paid for a meal in a while, so we might just sit down and get some, like a pizza or something. All right.
Well, we had a beer and some very overpriced empanadas. Checked out the Laguna, which I'm convinced must be home to the Swamp Thing, or at least you would turn into the Swamp Thing if you fell into the water, and watched all the dune buggies zip around. But we had had enough of this so-called oasis and headed back to our happy place, aka the middle of nowhere, to explore some dunes.
So this is that dune that we were just videoing. I don't know if you can see the people. You'll just see little dots at the top. That's the Huacachina, the top of sort of the sandboarding run. And then on the other side of it is where we were yesterday, which is just the normal city of Ica. Hey, oh, there's bottles flying out of the bus in front of us. You wonder where the trash comes from.
Desert and nothing for as far as we can see for a long, long ways. Pretty crazy. Don't think I've ever been in so much sand dunes and desert. It's pretty mind-blowing how big it is and how empty it is. Not much to see out here. Well, just when we were starting to feel like we were all alone, we saw someone off in the distance seemingly waving us down. So we headed over to see what was up. It turned out to be these two, out for a pleasure romp in the dunes, but they had no idea what they were doing and had gotten stuck. And once they were stuck, they really had no idea what to do. Luckily, they weren't very stuck. So we tried to tell them that letting some air out of the tires would help, but they weren't too keen on that idea. So we just dragged them out of their predicament, wished them luck, and said we would keep an eye on them until they made it back to the dirt road.
So, dude, they're the luckiest people in the world. So we're sitting out here in just nothingness. There is a road over that way. We left the road to go search for a campsite. We saw some tracks that were fairly fresh, but the wind had already blown them over a little bit. So I was like, it's probably a day or two old. But the wind worked so fast here, I think it was these guys' tracks. They're completely stuck. It's the truck we saw earlier for sure. Off on the other side of the road, just meandering around in the dunes. They say they're in four-wheel drive, but I think only the right rear is spinning, so I think they're actually in two-wheel drive. Their tires were at 55 PSI, and so I aired one of them down to 20, and they said, no more, don't do any more. It's better, and so they're like, okay, but no, none of the other tires. All right, well, you need the others to work, but super, super nice guys. They had a sketchy strap that was like a climbing rope, and they tied that up, and it was like, at this point in the trip, we've just let we've used other people's stuff.
Yeah.
I always recommend in classes, use your own gear, you trust it, you know it. But we're talking about dead level ground, and then one tire's dug a hole. So I knew it didn't take much. I was like,
and there was no metal pieces.
No metal, and he had it around his axle, the leaf spring perch and the axle, and it was like,
be more damage to our gear to use our gear than.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, okay, we'll use your strap. And so I pulled a little bit, then he ran over the strap, ripped it, and then we retied it, or he retied it and put it onto the truck. I think I might drive the top of the hill, make sure they're not there, or they're going to be walking back looking for us. But insane that we pulled off the road and we're just in raw open desert. We're not in the Paracas Park, by the way. I wouldn't cut random roads, but this whole area is like the play area. This is where Dakar happened. You can see where some of the stages cut through, because there's all these tracks, you know, several hundred tracks, motorcycle and car, and then nothing recent. So you can tell in the last year, this is where Dakar came through, and then their tracks are being washed away randomly. So we're kind of following some Dakar tracks and saw these guys completely stuck. So we're off to look for a campsite now.
Eventually, we ended up here for the night. Can you spot goose? This little spot was protected from the wind. We explored around the area on foot, made some dinner, and then sat back to enjoy our incredible surroundings. I don't think anything can make me feel as small as a vast desert landscape like this. It's epic, a little intimidating, and so crazy beautiful in its starkness. It's so artistic, the curves, the colors, the way it's always changing. It's like living art. Thanks for watching, guys. We hope you're all staying healthy. Never mind, they're not stuck. That was a happy wave, not a I need help wave. So,
yep.
Now we're on our merry way.